Well, hello there. Welcome to another video. Today we're doing another geeky craft, and this time it's a Valentine's Day themed. Barely. So for Valentine's Day, I really want to get my boyfriend Snipperclip plushes because 1, he likes plushes and figures, and 2, we play Snipperclips together, but they did not exist. And that was very sad, and so instead of, changing my idea and going for something easy, I was like, no, you know what? I'm gonna make these plushes so that I can give him the gift that I want to give him. And here we are. I decided to make both of the main characters that you can play during Snipperclips. There are 2 other characters if you play 3-player, 4-player, but these are your main ones. I decided to make them for myself. Or, for myself to give to someone as a gift. I promise, they're not just for me. I did not just make myself a bunch of plushes. Though that's perfectly fine if you want to. More power to you. So this is a kind of intermediate project depending on how good you are at either gluing or sewing. I suck at sewing. I don't know a thing about it other than like patching up a pair of leggings. I don't know how to work a sewing machine. I don't do hand stitching very well. It's not my forte. But you don't have to be able to sew to make these. If you did paper crafts as a kid, it's pretty much the same thing. We're just using fabric instead. What you need is yellow and pink fabric. I used cotton that I found at a craft store. It's pretty plain cotton. I did have to iron it quite a bunch, and there are still a little bit of folds in it that you can see, creases, no matter how much I ironed it. But it doesn't look too bad, and it worked for me. If you go to a fabric store, I'm sure you'll have much more options, but I got a discount by going to the craft store. You will also need white fabric, black fabric, and a little bit of dark pink and a little bit of orange, because they're just full of different colors. Luckily enough, they are supposed to be matching colors, so the yellow on this and the dark pink on this are the same color. You don't need to get extra. From there, you need stuffing to make them a plush, and you can either sew it using a sewing machine, hand stitching. It's just gonna take you a very long time with hand stitching, or you can use what I use, which is the miracle of liquid stitch. It is a fabric glue adhesive that's a permanent bond, holds really, really strong, and worked for me. You will see that there is a little bit of a mess with some of the glue up at the corners, but for the most part, they're handmade. They're supposed to look like you made them, so I will live with it. Poor little pink one. And you can see that you can see a little bit of the glue dots in the eyes, but again, it's supposed to be a handmade craft. It's handmade. You will also need scissors and pins and some big sheets of tracing paper to make your pattern. Now the first thing you have to do is draft your pattern. So what I did was I freehand drew on tracing paper the shapes that I would need with the large body, and then I left myself a little bit of a seam allowance in the corners. I only know these phrases because I follow the one YouTuber who does sewing tutorials and talks about sewing, and believe me, she was a lifesaver. I will leave her link down below. Her name is Angela Clayton. She does mostly period piece clothing, but she's really good at it, and I highly recommend if you're interested in sewing, you go listen to her, because I'm not going to give you that information. I don't know it. That being said, she did help me with some pattern making ideas, which was to leave the seam allowance for the things that I needed. So with this, after I freehanded it, I measured it. So I would know about what I needed if I need to do it again. So it ended up being about 8 inches long and with a 3.5 inch seam allowance all around the sides. And since I wanted it to be a 3D plush, as you can see, there's an edge, I needed to create a pattern for the edges. So this piece and this piece are 2 different pieces. You have the top piece. It's 2 inches by 8 inches with a 1/3 inch seam allowance. And then you have the rest of the body, which is a really long piece of fabric or pattern. It ends up being about, let's see, 2 inches by, I think it was 28.5 inches with a 1/3 inch seam allowance all around the side. Again, I freehanded all of them. You can do the same, you can measure it out. I just used the image of the Snipperclip characters as the reference point. From there, you have the 2 kinds of boots. You have the pink boot, which is the higher cowboy boot kind of look, and then you have the smaller boot, which is the one for the yellow character. And the easiest thing I can say to do is take your fabric, fold it in half, pin your pattern in place, and then cut it out. You will end up with 2 exact pieces on 2 opposite sides, so you end up with the right matching pieces to make one boot. and you only have to cut it once. Now the boots, I didn't care about making a 3D effect, so the boots are the flat stitch. There's no edges on them. I just did the 2 pieces and cut them out, sewed them together. To cut out your pieces, you just need to pin your pattern into place on your fabric. Again, I ironed the fabric to make sure I got out as many wrinkles as I could, and then I used straight pins to pin the edges all around. I cut them all out, lined them up, and then I liquid stitched them together. Everything is just flat on except for the bow ties and the long ties. Everything else is just glued flat onto it, but they are glued in pieces. I had a piece for the eyeball, a piece for the inner eyeball, a piece for the eyebrow, the cheeks, the mouth. I used the same pattern for the eyeballs for each character. Once I cut these out first, so I got the eyelashes, and then I just cut the eyelashes off when I cut off the other eye. Cut out the other eye. I did not cut it off. Goodness, that would be a completely different kind of tutorial. Once you've got your face glued on, you just let it dry, or you can stitch it on. Again, it's up to you. You just let it sit for a bit while you work on the other pieces. I would leave putting your face on till last because it's the one piece that's going to be the hardest to redo if you have to redo it. And also, if you're using liquid stitch, I would recommend not doing it at the end. I would do it before you glue all your pieces together, because liquid stitch will stick to fabric, and if you glue it at the wrong time, you could end up gluing it and it will sink into the back of your pillow, and it'll just be a mess, a big old mess. And then all that's left to do is put it all together. It's really simple once you get there, mostly. For the boots, I left a bit, about ½ an inch at the top that was unstuffed once I glued them together. I glued all the edges of the boot and I left the top open so that I could flip them inside out and get the clean edge that you see on the boot. The only thing that didn't work with that was the tie for the pink character, because for some reason their tie did not want to work with me, so it has a rougher edge. Once you get the boot flipped inside out, you will glue shut the top after you have stuffed it. That means that the stuffing won't somehow get pushed out of the boot once you put it all together, and it gives a flat surface for when you put them together to fit inside your seam here. From there, you start with the back of your plush. What you do is you take the right facing sides of the fabric, so the parts of the fabric that you want to end up on the outside. So what I did was I placed the wrong side of the back, so not the part that you're seeing on the outside, but the other side, down on my cardboard, which I used as a flat surface to let me glue, so that I wasn't doing it onto my rug or something like that, because I didn't want it to, again, the glue to sink in and not be able to move it. Let me show you via this. This is your right side of the fabric that's laying down flat. The right side of my fabric for this is the side that has the lines that I drew on it. I'm going to place that right side against the seam lines for these so that they are facing each other. And then I'm going to glue this with some liquid stitch and let it sit. That way I create this stitch right here so that when it's flipped inside out so that I can stuff it, the right sides of the fabric are facing each other and I don't have the stitch sticking out. Instead, it is inside the plush. Once that's dried, you're going to repeat the process for the long piece of fabric. Now that is the most difficult part of this entire thing, is making sure that you line it up properly, because I didn't cut out separate pieces for the curve. I just did one big long piece, and so you have to carefully follow the curve. As you can see, some of the stitches are a little rough, but it worked out pretty well in my opinion. His butt's not too wrinkly, and so you're just following it along and letting it rest. Make sure that when you're letting it sit to glue that the rest of it is not touching the glue, so that everything's kind of propped up away from it, so that only the parts that you want to stick together are sticking together. The next thing I did was I took my face fabric, and what I did was I lined up where I wanted the flat pieces of each boot to lay on the seam, and I glued them to the face. So when I set the boots to dry, they ended up drying like this, face up, so that they would stick to this part of the face. I could have done it to the other piece, but this one worked easier for me. And you know that if you're gluing them like this, once you put the back stitch on and flip it down, the legs are gonna hang free and they'll be facing the right way. You just need to reference the characters when you're looking at them. With these, the yellow cowboy boots, both of the feet face out, but when you're looking at the pink character, both of their feet face in. They are a bit pigeon-toed, but that's how the character is designed. It's not a mistake, they're designed that way. Once I let the feet dry onto the face, I made sure that they were gonna sit the way I wanted them to sit. Not that I could have done that much if they didn't, but they did. And then I did the same hard process of lining up the entire curved stitch of the side pieces to the face. Now that was very, very, very stress inducing because I did not want to mess up the face. And again, one of the reasons I don't have a lot of this filmed is because I was just stressing so much about how this wasn't gonna work, this wasn't gonna work, this wasn't gonna work, but it ended up fine. Once you get that done, you're left just with the open top. So before then, everything that was right, the sides that I wanted to face outward were facing inward at each other so I could make the seams be on the inside. Once you flip it out, you're left with these closed seams that are much prettier than if you had them all sticking out all crazy. The only thing left open was this top seam, and that's where I stuffed it. All I did was I stuffed for as much as I could except for the very top of it because I still needed to glue it closed. I glued right here, leaving about an inch open on the edge so that I could fully stuff here in the corners up at the top to my preference. The hardest part to glue was this stitch up here because once you stuff it fuller, it doesn't like to close. You just kind of have to hold it, and that's why on the pink one there's a little bit of a glue mess because it just didn't want to be closed. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well. And that is how I made 2 cotton plushes of the Snipperclip characters. Anything that I use that I can find a link for will be linked down below. If you have any other questions, I know I'm not the best at explaining how I did it, but now you know it can be done. And if you feel like making your significant other, your friend, whoever you play this game with, a plush and you keep one and they keep one, or you give them both, what have you, now you know how. You know the stuff that you need, you know those steps that you need to take, and look, it's a perfect little match. I hope you all are having a fantastic Valentine's Day, and whether you're spending it with a lover or a friend or yourself, I hope there's just enough love to share around and that you get some good food, because what's Valentine's Day if not all the good food? Candy, sweets, dinner, breakfast, everything. If you liked what you saw here today, please subscribe and give this video a like. Let me know what else you would like to see me try to make, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Where did I put my pattern pieces? It would be good if I knew where I put them. There we go.